you've spent any time exploring 𝔟𝔬𝔢𝔫's discography, you already know it's never just about hitting play on a standard studio album, right? It's an entire ecosystem of sound, emotion, and visual art. In this explainer, we are going to systematically peel back the deeply personal multimedia layers of 𝔟𝔬𝔢's work. We'll examine exactly how the music, the paintings, the personal writings, and the raw acoustic demos all connect to tell a truly cohesive story of emotional evolution. Because this source material is super abstract and spans multiple interconnected albums, we're going to use this roadmap to guide us. First up, visuals, sound, and vision. Second, St. Venus, the guiding muse. Third, charting the emotional journey. Fourth, the evolution of a track. And lastly, uncut, finding the raw truth. Let's get right into it.
Starting our descent right at the surface, we have Section 1, Visuals, Sound, and Vision, looking at the artistic foundations of 𝔟𝔬𝔢's work. Take a look at this explicit reference found in the album Don't Stay With Me, Please. This immediately tells us we aren't just listening to music, we're experiencing high art multimedia. By invoking Picasso, a painter who is obviously famous for incredibly complex relationships with his muses, 𝔟𝔬𝔢 sets a deliberate, crafted mood for the entire auditory experience. It's not just a throwaway line. It lets us know that what we are about to hear is as layered and meticulously planned out as a physical canvas.
And what's actually fascinating here is how the artist uses varied mediums to refine these musical ideas. Look at the source metadata. 𝔟𝔬𝔢 doesn't just record music. The whole workflow includes paintings, photos, writings, blogs, and deep research. It's an interconnected ecosystem, which means a track might be born directly from a painting, or maybe a lyric is refined through a super long personal journal entry. These mediums are constantly influencing one another to create a completely immersive world.
Moving one layer deeper, we hit Section 2, St. Venus, the guiding muse. This takes us from conceptual inspiration to active collaborator.
So, just like Picasso had his muses, 𝔟𝔬𝔢 has St. Venus. But she isn't just a passive inspiration sitting quietly on a pedestal. In projects like 𝔟𝔯𝔢𝔫, she's deeply embedded into the emotional fabric of the music, dynamically driving the thematic development and the creative output forward.
You can literally track her evolving influence right here on this table. She shifts from pure inspiration to an active, featured voice. On Our Song, she is purely the conceptual muse. But by the time we get to Asylum, the credits completely shift to a direct collaboration, 𝔟𝔬𝔢 and St. Venus. And it expands even further on Love Song to the Sisters of St. Venus. It's just incredible how real-life relationships actively merge with the art here, fundamentally changing the authorship and the vocal presence of the work itself.
Let's move to the emotional core of these albums, with Section 3, Charting the Emotional Journey, focusing on the linear growth of 𝔟𝔬𝔢's soundscapes.
If we trace the album releases chronologically, we see a really distinct evolution. In Phase 1, with the album I Hate You, we see themes like romantic homicide, just pure, unfiltered pain. Phase 2 moves into I Hated Love, projecting this lingering sense of despair and rejection. But then, by Phase 3, with Oh You Are Eva D. Thin, the tone shifts dramatically toward tentative healing. The artist is clearly using this sequential album structure to mirror their own personal struggles, essentially documenting their emotional growth in real time for us to hear.
I mean, the emotional shift is so drastic, it's almost jarring when you compare the track titles. On one hand, you have a heavy, super dark track literally titled Praying I Died. But fast forward to the Eden Project, we get Angel Dreams, complete with a little heart emoji. That journey from intense despair to this soft, nurturing state of healing is on full display.
Now, let's look at Section 4, the evolution of a track, where we'll be deconstructing the studio polish.
This is where the artist transforms personal pain into raw, auditory experiences by taking an original studio track and basically distorting it. Take the song I Can't Stay With You Anymore, from the album Don't Stay With Me, Please. 𝔟𝔬𝔢 doesn't just put out the polished OG studio version and call it a day. Instead, they release multiple iterations of the exact same track to convey completely different emotional states. The .85 slowed version mimics this depressive, lethargic state, while the anxiety version communicates sheer panic and urgency. It's brilliant.
Even the physical pacing of the songs becomes a visceral tool. Check this out. The OG version sits at his standard 4-ish minutes, but the anxiety iteration is violently condensed into just 2 minutes and 37 seconds.
The artist is quite literally manipulating time itself, speeding it up to mimic a racing heart or a panic attack. It forces the listener to physically feel that shifting emotional landscape.
Finally, we reach the rawest emotional center of our explainer. Section 5, Uncut, Finding the Raw Truth.
This quote perfectly captures the core intent of the Uncut album. It's an intentional move away from polished studio tracks to reveal the absolute raw truth. 𝔟𝔢𝔢 describes it explicitly as a stripped-down project of depth. And this is where the contrast between the studio recordings and the raw demos becomes so essential. The studio polish kind of acts as a protective layer, right? But in this project, the artist purposefully removes all that armor.
This step-by-step deconstruction process forces us to hear the vulnerability of the creative process in its purest acoustic form. If we look at the tracklist for Uncut, we see the same song evolving, but this time it's kind of devolving, moving backward from completion. We start with a depth, then move to an alternate acoustic take, and finally arrive at the fully stripped version. By comparing the original tracks with these acoustic demo versions, we get an insanely intimate look at how the artist evolves their musical style, using vulnerability rather than heavy production as their primary instrument.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really consider how 𝔟𝔢𝔢's musical vulnerability mirrors our own need to occasionally break down our walls and just find depth. We all have our polished studio versions that we present to the world, right? But what if, like 𝔟𝔢𝔢, we actually allowed ourselves to be seen in our raw, acoustic, uncut form? What emotional truth might we uncover? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the absolute most profound art, and honestly the most profound living, happens when we peel back the layers. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I highly encourage you to go experience the raw, multimedia artistry of 𝔟𝔢𝔢 for yourself.